Last episode, we talked about one Florida Panther as a Sabres option in free agency. Today, another one. What about Aaron Ekblad in free agency? We'll talk about the likely future free agent coming up here in the Locked On Sabres podcast.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody, and welcome into this edition of the Locked On Sabres podcast here on a Friday. And thanks for making us your first listen every day, free and available wherever you get your podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Sneaky Joe DiBiase here on a Friday, and we are through Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Final. And it was an incredible game between those two teams, the two best teams in the league, and really might develop into a rivalry just in the fact that they've played 11 games here of finals hockey now, and maybe they'll play again in a future year. I'm having visions of Cavs Warriors in the middle of the 2010s in the NBA, and that became a rivalry because of how awesome those finals were. These finals have been amazing. A 3-0 deficit overcome by Edmonton. Then Sam Reinhart scores the second to latest game-tying goal in Stanley Cup Final history. The latest, by the way, was Corey Perry in Game 2. So you've had two moments like that. Overtimes every one of these games. I mean, hey, for someone that gets up as early as I do, that's not great for me personally. But for hockey fans, it's been incredible hockey. And Edmonton tying the series, shows us that we're probably getting a 7-game series, but we'll see. Series shifts back to Edmonton tomorrow. By the way, Jeff Skinner back in the lineup, and a good thing because you had Taylor Swift in the building, and then of course everyone having their fun on social media with the picture from 15 years ago of Taylor Swift holding up a Jeff Skinner jersey next to Jeff Skinner. So you had a lot of good fun with that. Skinner also, how about he was good last night? I mean, he's Jeff Skinner. He's not going to give you a whole well-rounded game, but he had scoring chances. He almost had the game winner in overtime. He could have had one or two before that. He had the highest expected goals for percentage of any player in that game last night. When he was on the ice, the Oilers were getting chances, and they had the puck in the offensive zone. Limited minutes, so I think they did a good job protecting his minutes, but I think he's played well enough in 3 games of the playoffs to warrant staying in that lineup. Really, I've always said I've understood why Skinner's not on the lineup for Edmonton, but the one game he played against LA in round 1, the game he played in the conference finals, and then this game he played last night, he's played pretty well in all 3. So by his play, I feel like he might stay in the lineup going forward here, and he should over Victor Arvidsson. The guy we're going to talk about today, as we talk free agent options for the Buffalo Sabres. If you missed our last conversation, we talked about one Florida Panther and Sam Bennett. Today, we're going to talk about Aaron Ekblad. That will be our 3rd free agent that we will talk about. And before we get all in on Aaron Ekblad, a couple of updates on the 2 guys we've already talked about and Ekblad as it pertains to free agency. Those are arguably the 3 biggest names. You could argue whether Ekblad is or not, but he's the guy we'll talk about today. So let's start with the first guy we talked about and have talked about a lot, Mitch Marner. Marner's leaving Toronto. It's kind of, writing's been on the wall, but we have a definitive report now from Andy Strickland, who does cover the St. Louis Blues, but often will be plugged into the national landscape, and he's very plugged into Craig Berube. People around Craig Berube, who used to be the Blues coach, and now he's the Toronto coach. Remember, Strickland was the one that reported that the Sabres were interested in Berube last summer, and I believe him because he's got sources close to him. So I'd imagine this is coming from somewhere around Berube, but Strickland reported today that it's over, that Marner will leave Toronto this summer, that he is going to go elsewhere. And again, not stunning. We've kind of been expecting that, and I fully believe that report. The other one we had today on Marner is that Carolina, this is from Dave Pagnotta of the 4th period, Carolina, who showed interest in Marner at the deadline and tried to get that deal done, and maybe if Marner waives no trade clause, he does go there in a trade, that the Hurricanes are prepping an offer of more than $14 million per year to land Marner in free agency. Now, when we talked about him for the Sabres are going to probably have to have, if they want to even be entertained as an option by Marner, they'll have to, I think, have the most money offered. They have to outbid the rest, and even then, they probably still won't get him. But if you want to be in it, you got to have the highest offer. If Carolina's going north of $14 million, I mean, look at the number we're talking about. If the Sabres have to have the number one bid, it's got to be like $16 million a year, which is a sticker shock number and one that I would not expect the Pagulas to be ready to put forward for him. But that's probably got to be the number if you want to be in the conversation for Marner, is $16 million a year, given that Carolina is going to be probably close to $15 million. So that's on Marner. On Sam Bennett, who we talked about on our last show, the expectation is that Bennett and the Panthers are likely to extend this summer when he becomes a free agent. That was also from Pagnota. Pretty much locked in to stay in Florida, deal around 8 years, $8 million per is being discussed. So there's that on Bennett. Sounds like he's staying with the Panthers. Probably can take him off the table as an option for all teams, but including, the Sabres if they were going to be in on that. Toronto specifically, because I think Toronto would have really loved to have Sam Bennett. We'll see if that ends up being factual, but it looks like I would expect that to be true. Now on Aaron Ekblad, who we are going to speak about today. The report from EJ Radick, again, we got a lot of people plugged in reporting on stuff. The word is that Ekblad is likely heading to free agency. Florida wants him at less than his current AAV, which is $7.5 million, something in the 6 range. So doesn't sound like that is something that Ekblad wants, is to take a pay cut. Bennett is the one they're prioritizing, not Ekblad. And that is a factor in Ekblad that we'll talk about today and what level of player he still is. But that also means that there's going to be some bidding for Aaron Ekblad probably come next month. Edmonton, Toronto, Detroit, all being mentioned as teams that would look for him. What about the Sabres? Well, before we get to the Sabres end of it, what they would have to look at for him in a contract, the fit, how he would fit on the team with maybe Owen Power. How good is Aaron Ekblad still? And there are a couple of things to get into on this, on Ekblad, because he's a tougher player to evaluate than some other defensemen, because I don't think it's fair to say that his entire game, at least his entire reputation, is based on points and numbers. There is a physical game with Aaron Ekblad. There is a defensive game with Aaron Ekblad. There is an expectation of him being a leader wherever he would go. He wears a letter for that team. He's been with that team as long as anybody. It's him and Barkov that have been there the longest. 11 years. That first overall pick back in 2014, he was the Panthers pick there, and he's been with them the whole time. This guy's played a lot of hockey. This is not about what he was as a player. This is about what he is now. How good is he still? I think you have serious questions about how good of a player Aaron Ekblad is, because his body might just not be right anymore. And I have concerns going forward about any team signing him to a long-term contract when this guy's had a couple concussions. He has had a lot of upper body, lower body stuff that we don't really know about because it's a little unspecific on that front. He was carted off and missed the season with a broken leg a couple of years ago. This year, 56 games. Previous year, 51, 71, 61, 35. That's his last 5 years. So, he's missing almost 50 games, then he's missing 20, then he's missing 10, then he's missing 30. And this year, he missed 20 so. Different reason. Suspension. PED suspension. His game appeared to be trending up. I listen to the Dan Le Batard show a lot out of Miami, and they talk a lot of Florida Panthers because they're right there and they're all big Panther fans. And what I heard from them during the middle of the season when this was happening was that Ekblad had been, had been pointing down on him, that he had not been the same player in recent years that he had been early in his career. Still a fine player, but not like a number one defenseman like maybe you thought he was at one point in time. made a couple of all-star teams early on in his career. He wasn't giving you that. And part of it was his body was breaking down. Guys played a lot of minutes. He's played a physical style, 18,000 minutes, over 18,000 minutes in his NHL career between the regular season in the playoffs. He's played a lot of hockey, a lot of physical hockey for his size, and his body maybe was starting to break down. Well, this year, he wasn't getting injured, and he was playing better both ends of the ice, and then he got hit with this PED suspension. And listening to the Le Batard show about that, I remember them saying, like, oh, well, this kind of explains it a little bit, doesn't it? Like, how did Aaron Ekblad suddenly start staying healthier and his game improve? Well, listen, guys take stuff to make their bodies feel better and feel right and perform at the highest level. And for Ekblad, maybe that is why he had some, more success this year in some areas of his game than he had the previous season. So he gets hit with that PED suspension, then he comes back, and he's been pretty darn good in the playoffs. I mean, the offense has certainly jumped up for him. He's playing 24 minutes a night. He's laying the body. He took McDavid out of game 3, right, with that hit that he had at the blue line. So I think what you have in Ekblad is a player where the biggest question is about injuries and will he hold up. We'll get more, though, on the numbers on how good Ekblad is and then what it's going to take to get him for any team at free agency coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast is presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. We're into the finals, both for hockey and for the NBA. And the NBA playoffs, when you get to this end, man, it's awesome. There you get highlight-worthy performances, legendary moments that you'll never forget, game-winning shots, breakout players. There's never been a better time to get in on the action. And FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game. Before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. So you could look at, in terms of tonight, over-unders on SGA. I kind of like the over on SGA because I think the series is waiting for somebody to take it over. So, that's what I'll be looking at for tonight's game is SGA. He likes to get to the free throw line. So more specifically, I'd like to get a little over on that free throw number. But of course, you got some great action for the Oilers and the Panthers as well. So take a look at that because right now, best time to get in on this because your first $5 bet at FanDuel Sportsbook, if it wins, $200 in bonus bets. How can you beat that? So if you're new to FanDuel, again, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place that first $5 bet, and if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Sneaky Joe DiBiase back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We're talking about Aaron Ekblad as a free agent option today. How good is Aaron Ekblad? What are you getting as a player at this point in time for Aaron Ekblad? I think you are still getting some offense, scored some goals, plays on the power play for Florida, the second unit more so during this series, sometimes on the first unit. I think you're also getting a player that shows some limitations. He's not a great skater. Looking at some of his NHL Edge numbers, he is below the 50th percentile because, of course, NHL Edge doesn't want to tell you how bad a guy is. Anything below 50, they just say below 50. But, for instance, 20 to 22 mile per hour speed bursts this season. For defensemen, the average in the NHL is 28. Ekblad had 10 this season. So, below average on that front. And listen, we just saw him get his ankles broken by Connor McDavid in game 4. McDavid almost scoring the goal of the playoffs so far. Listen, I don't want to blast the guy for getting his ankles broken by Connor McDavid. Anybody in the league can have that happen to them. But that's not a matchup that I necessarily love for Florida, is when Ekblad is out there against McDavid because it does show one of his limitations. Now, is it so preventative that it makes him a terrible player? No, I don't think so. But, you might want to pair him up with a guy who's a smooth skater at least, if not an elite skater on the blue line, which we'll get to. Maybe you think Owen Power is at least the smooth skater for that. So the skating is not necessarily there for Ekblad. His defensive game does leave a little bit to be desired. He's not like the best shutdown defenseman in the NHL. There are some numbers that kind of point to, this line actually gives up a lot of chances when he's out there. So with Ekblad, I think you have a gap here between maybe how good he is and what his reputation is. I think he does give you some good offensively, but think a team is going to convince themselves. This is kind of similar to the Bennett conversation from our last show. A team is going to convince themselves that this guy is going to come in and be, because how was he described as a prospect? Was he early in his career? Remember, this is the dude with a full beard at 18 years old. He looked like he was 35 when he was 18. This is like this guy was described as a horse for you. And when you hear him described that way, it's, this is going to be my stay-at-home, shut-down elite defenseman. And he's not that to that degree. I think a team's going to convince themselves that, he's going to come in and be my shut-down defenseman. And I think he might leave some to be desired. And again, to the injury part of it, with no PEDs in the system going forward, assumed, if his body doesn't hold up playing that style, what good is it? I'm thinking of Mattias Samuelsson a little bit for this. Mattias Samuelsson, tries to, does he try? Probably doesn't try hard enough, but the physical style, he's a big body. He blocks a lot of shots, but he also gets injured all the time. So the style he wants to play, his body can't hold up through that. So something's got to give there. And with Ekblad, I really do wonder as he enters his 30s, is it a smart idea to give that guy a 6-7 year contract? I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical of that because I think he's a good player, but I don't think he's a great defenseman in the NHL. I think what is he right now on the Panthers? On a good team, on a great team, he's a second pair defenseman. He's going to have suitors. Toronto's one of them. Detroit is one of them. We've had a couple of teams that have already been mentioned for this, and I think he's going to get a good number. Now, and you can kind of connect the dots here. If Florida wants to keep him, but for less than he's making now, and he's likely to go to free agency, well, that would speak to he doesn't want to take that pay cut. He's going to want at least that number that he's making now, $7.5 million. I could see Toronto being willing to give him that. Detroit has been very willing to pay for free agents, even mid-level free agents. Remember Andrew Kopp a couple of years ago, and JT Compher and David Perron, and mid-season Patrick Kane. Like, Detroit's been willing to pay the price to get veteran free agents to come in. I would expect that a team like that is willing to pay the price to get Aaron Ekblad. And honestly, I'm a little bit torn, but I would lean towards the side of hoping the Sabres do not make a giant offer to Aaron Ekblad. It would be filed under, hey, listen, they're not sitting on their hands. They're trying to get, the one area of it I like the most is the Owen Power-partner of it, and we'll get to that. But I wouldn't want to crucify them for going all in Eric Ekblad because it would finally be some motivation to get good right now that we haven't seen enough of. But is it a smart investment? And if you told me it's going to cost you like $7.5 million over 5 or 6 years for Aaron Ekblad, I would not consider that a very smart investment because of the injury history, because of the little bit of decline we've had as a player. And again, on Florida, he does play big minutes, but I don't think he's that team's best defenseman. I don't even know that he's one of that team's 3 best defensemen. If you had me power rank who their best defensemen are, the most meaningful defensemen, Forsling, to me, is number 1. I honestly might go Nico Mikkola and Seth Jones, number 2 and 3. Ekblad's in that tier at least. You could argue Ekblad is the second best guy, and he plays with Forsling. So he is playing on the top pair, but I think he's probably that team's 4th best defenseman. Still good, but to that point, wouldn't he be the 3rd best defenseman on the Buffalo Sabres? And isn't that pretty good? Let's go to that. The fit. If this was to be something that excites Kevin Adams and he were to go all in on it and he got it done, where would Ekblad fit on the Buffalo Sabres? Well, that part of it actually might be the best defense for going after it because it's very natural to see him in this lineup, I think. We'll get to that coming up on Locked On Sabres. Today's episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast is presented by Indeed. So you just realized that your business needed to hire somebody like yesterday. Well, how can you find amazing candidates fast? Well, easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. Indeed sponsored jobs. Put your post at the top of the page and they'll help you reach the right candidate faster. You ever been in that spot where you need the right hire like yesterday and the pressure is on and every day without the right person is a setback? Well, that's exactly when Indeed sponsored jobs comes in handy. They make sure that your post is seen by the right candidates right now. So now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now. Support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need. Back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. All right, let's play the game. Let's play the hypothetical. The Sabres have done it. They have signed Aaron Ekblad, their big ticket free agent acquisition. They signed him for like 6 years at $7.5, $8 million a year. He's coming to the Buffalo Sabres. You'll hear a lot about a winning mentality, changing the culture, playing on a Stanley Cup champion. Maybe he's a back-to-back champion by the time that happens, and coming to be a veteran presence on a team, maybe even wear a letter right away for the Buffalo Sabres. That's all well and good. I could argue it's very well needed, and that the young guys on this team, it would be a good influence on them to have Aaron Ekblad in that locker room. That's not enough for me to want to sign him to that contract, but I do think it's valuable to some extent. I'm more interested in what he could do for Owen Power. What would it be like to have Aaron Ekblad on that right side with Owen Power? And even though I've a little bit more pessimistic on what level of player you're still getting out of Aaron Ekblad at this point, I do think that the most exciting part of this idea is the idea of putting him with Owen Power. Ekblad's a right shot defenseman, so you could have him play on his natural right side. You could have Power play on the left. Put him with Owen Power. Let that cook. Let Power ride into the next season with the guy they've been looking for 3 years. A veteran, experienced defenseman, an upgrade over the guy that Powers played the most minutes with in his Sabre career, which was Henry Jokiharju. And as much as I might not be super high on Ekblad as a player, no doubt he is leaps and bounds better than Henry Jokiharju is. And again, the mentoring that maybe he could give Power a little bit, both being number 1 overall picks, if that matters at all, what the expectations are like, how you deal with that. Power's probably fine with that at this point, right? He's a very mellow guy. He's not being met with like this total package of expectations. I think he's a little bit polarizing, but it's not like, fans are banging down the door, mad at him. But I do think Ekblad would be a positive influence on Power. How they would fit on the ice is more interesting to me. I think I wouldn't assume that they would be a perfect fit, because Ekblad, again, like that stay-at-home type of defenseman, I don't really know if that really is his game. I mean, it is to some extent, but he does like to jump up in the play. He does like to contribute offensively. And Power is somebody that likes to control the game, and he likes to jump up once in a while. So maybe they would have a symbiotic relationship of knowing who's going up when, and kind of going back and forth, like when Dahlin and Byram kind of play together. I've always felt that they've always been very on top of who's going up, who's coming back, because both guys are very active. Maybe Power and Ekblad would develop that as well. They'd certainly be a big pairing, right? Power at 6'6", he'll continue to grow into his body, 6'5", and Ekblad at 6'4", 220. You'd certainly have a big second pairing. But I would absolutely, I don't even think this is a question. You would see him playing with Power. I would almost never expect to see him with Dahlin. And the thing you would have now on the Sabres blue line, assuming like a Bo Byram trade would come in concert with this, is our focus this offseason was we're going to get Owen Power more support to take the next step. And we're going to trust Dahlin to play with a mid-level partner and still get elite results. We're going to trust Dahlin to carry not a bad defenseman, but maybe like an average defenseman. And then maybe Samuelson. I would hope to do better than that. I hope he gets bought out. And we're going to put an experienced, talented guy like Aaron Ekblad with Owen Power to get the best results out of him. Again, wouldn't assume that would work, but I think that would be your plan. The summary for me, it's not the worst idea in the world. I think there are better ideas. We are, with all this in hindsight, like getting Power a better partner. One of the number one ticketed items, I think, for the Sabres this offseason. I do think there are better options. We'll talk about some of those options, whether it's Gavrikov, whether it's Keandre Miller, whether it is Dmitry Orlov. Like these guys, these are just some of the free agents. I'm not saying all these guys would be better than Ekblad, but there are going to be options for the Sabres this summer if they're looking for an Owen Power-partner. It's not Aaron Ekblad or bust. I don't think they have to be desperate for him because I think they'll find their way to somebody else. There are enough guys like that on the market right now. You know, Orlov, I kind of even jumped a little bit further down the list. Dante Fabro is one of these guys. Brian Dumoulin is a veteran that becomes a free agent. Ivan Provorov. Like these are some of the names that are going to become free agents. And we'll talk about a lot of them coming up in the next couple of weeks as we head to free agency. So Ekblad, one of them, but I'm not necessarily sure I'd put him right at the top. All right. Game 5 tomorrow night. The series has been awesome. JJ Peterka, by the way, there was a rumor today about him in Calgary. We'll talk about that next week. Not that he likes Calgary, but that Calgary's interested in him. I don't think that makes a lot of sense, though, for the Sabres or Peterka. So, you know, Calgary, I don't know what Calgary's doing. I don't think Peterka would be excited by that idea, even if he did want to leave. So there's that. Want more on Oilers and Panthers? Check out Locked On NHL Game Night. They have you covered all through this series until we get a champ between Florida and Edmonton. Find Locked On NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We'll talk to you on Monday here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.